Once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Discrete Option Multiple Choice, a Revolution in Testing, and thank you for taking the time for joining us today. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping tips as we get the presentation started. Please know that this session is being recorded. Both the links to the slides and the recording will be sent to you after the broadcast. Everyone will be on mute during the session. If you do have any questions, please use the question box to enter them, and I will relay them at a good stopping point. We have also saved time at the end for Q&A. Next slide, please. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker for today's session, Dr. David Foster. Dave is Cavion's founder and CEO. He has nearly 30 years of experience in the testing and measurement industry. He is credited with introducing computerized adaptive testing and simulation-based performance testing as part of Novell's IT pioneering certification program in the early 1990s. Following his tenure with Novell, he co-founded Dalton Technologies, which was acquired by Thomson Learning in 2000. With other industry colleagues, he founded Cavion in 2003, which was the industry's first test security company. Dave is a past president of ATP and has served on numerous committees in the credentialing industry. He holds a PhD in experimental psychology from Brigham Young University and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in psychobiology at Florida State University. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Foster to get us started today.
Okay, thanks, Tristan. Welcome all of you to our webinar today. I have prepared a lot of slides and a very interesting topic, and hopefully we'll be able to get through it. But as Tristan said, please ask any questions along the way, and we'll try to get to those. If not, we will compile them and answer them and send them to you separately. So the agenda for today, briefly, for some of you may not be familiar with DoMC, and so I'll give a brief overview of that, and then my perspective on why the technology is so important, why it's revolutionary, and barriers or challenges to using DoMC will be the next topic, and then we'll go into a section on immediate and long-term benefits of its use. And then finally end up with the, very briefly on the concept of the super discrete option multiple choice. So we're going to start off with a poll so I can get a feeling for the experience of the group with DoMC. So I'll turn it over to Tristan to conduct that poll.
All right. Everyone should see the poll if you could cast your vote. Most people have voted. We'll wait a few more seconds before we close it. All right, I think it looks like we're pretty good. I'll show the results.
Okay. As you can see, about half of you are kind of new for this topic, and so that's good. We'll get more clear on it. Some of you know a little bit about it. Some of you are very familiar, and like me, none of you know everything about how it works. So I would not have answered that one either. So that's it. Let's you can remove the poll results now. Thank you. Okay, I need to click on, all right. So, okay, what is a little bit of the overview? What is discrete option multiple choice? Well, as a description, and it's tough to describe completely, but I've tried to do it in a couple of sentences. Options for the multiple choice question are presented randomly, one at a time, accompanied by yes and no buttons. The test taker is expected to respond yes or no as to whether the option presented is a correct one or an incorrect one. Options are no longer needed when the test taker answers the question correctly or incorrectly. So the item ends when it's right or wrong. That's the basic functionality of the discrete option multiple choice. It is not easy to understand through that, but so I thought I would go to a website we put together, trydomc.com, which allows us to experience how it works. You're welcome at any time to go to that website and take some sample tests, read some of the literature. It's a little dated. We're in the process of updating it now, but the sample tests work just fine. I'm going to go to that right now and pick a sample test up on the top menu. The best one is under the general science mule deer facts. Some of us probably know a little bit about mule deer. It makes it an interesting, a little more of an interesting test, and it'll illustrate how the discrete option multiple choice test works. So I'm going to begin the test. So the first question came up: how long does it take for the spots on a newborn mule deer to disappear? So the first option is about 10 days. Well, I'm going to also show you a little bit of the inner workings. This is only on the sample test. This particular bit of information would not be presented to examinees in general. But in this case, this talks about this particular item. Supporting the item are 5 options, 1 correct and 4 incorrect. All of those may be presented. To get the item right, the test taker has to answer yes to 1 correct one. There's only 1 anyway. Or answer no to 3 incorrect ones. They'll get the answer right if they do either of those 2 patterns of responding. To get the item wrong, they answer no to a correct option, or they answer yes to an incorrect option. So let's just, I'm not sure, I think it's 6 weeks, so I'm going to say no. It gave me another option. About a year. No. About 3 weeks. I don't think so. About 10 weeks. Yes. Okay, item number 2, and we'll only do 3 or 4 of these. Sometimes when mule deer run, all 4 feet come off the ground at the same time, and they seem to sail through the air as though they were on springs. What is this type of running called? And this item has the same inner workings as the previous one. So we'll answer it quickly. It is not called trotting. It is not called bounding. Or maybe it is. Okay, I'm not sure. It left anyway and went to the 3rd item. Of the 40 living species of deer in the world, how many species are in the United States? I think the answer is 2. So 18 is not correct. 14 is not correct. 8 is not correct. And that item finished. One thing about the DoMC, and I'm pointing, if you can see my mouse pointer, you can see this extra option probability. This is after the question has been answered right or wrong, there is a chance, 50-50 chance in this case, to present an extra option if there's one available. This is used strictly to break up any feedback, response feedback that a person could occur by answering the yes or no buttons. It's a very important extra little feature of the DoMC item type. It's not difficult to use. Most of the default is 0.5, and it just can be there the whole time. I'm going to go out of try DoMC, but I just wanted to say there's sample tests in architecture, college entrance, elementary subjects, healthcare, language proficiency, history, so on. I hope that gave you a little better idea of how DoMC operates, it really will not be great until you go do it yourself and get that feeling for it. And don't forget to hit the inner workings button to find out what each item is composed of and how it's scored. Okay, the title of the webinar says this is a revolutionary technology. I believe it is. I've been ranting and raving about it in that sense for a few years now. And these are the reasons why I think it's revolutionary. We're going to talk about some of these later, but I want to give you my perspective as to why this is not just an evolutionary change, not just an incremental change in how testing works, but how it may and can redefine the way the industry works, the way we work. So the first one, it greatly improves the security of tests. The second one, it eliminates unfairness found in traditional multiple choice tests. And I'll discuss that a bit. And anything that removes unfairness, of course, is highly prized. It reduces test administration costs. It reduces test development costs. It increases the accuracy of my tests. It expands the type of skills that can be measured. It accommodates a broader range of test takers. And it motivates students to prepare more deeply, better for exams. There are probably a number of benefits that it has in addition to these. But you get a picture that if it can do all this, it would really be helpful. So the question on this slide is, so if it's that good, why isn't everyone using it? What are the biggest concerns? So I have another poll coming up where we're going to talk about what might be the reasons organizations, individuals hesitate to adopt a DoMC. So I'm going to ask Tristan to poll you there. For some reason, GoToWebinar does not allow more than 5 choices on a polling screen. So you'll see 3 in a row along with the results of those. You'll be asked to pick what might be your concerns about DoMC. Even, some of you may not know it that well and have no concerns, except the fact that you don't know it that well. So I'm going to, but pick all the ones that seem to be of concern to you. And so I'll turn it back to Tristan for those.
Okay, Dave. So we've actually had a few questions come in just now. Do you want to address those first?
I'll take a couple of them, yes.
Okay. So the first one is, could you please rephrase the rationale behind the extra option probability feature?
Yeah, that's a good question. Often, well, not often, when a person responds to a DoMC question and they hit yes or no, and the question goes away, they have this assumption that I must have got it right, or I must have got it wrong. That's kind of an inherent process you go through. The extra option is simply meant to not allow that to happen. What people with that extra option, people then lose interest in trying to gauge whether they got it right or wrong. They just move from item to item. So it simply breaks up that little feedback loop, that little thinking string a person has when they complete the DoMC. I know I didn't do any better with that, and I apologize. If I'll write up an answer to this, and hopefully that will work better. Next question.
Okay. The setup of sample question 5, or of sample questions, 5 choices to get an item correct, 2 options, 1 correct answer, or identifying 3 incorrect answers. If a candidate correctly identifies 3 incorrect answers, that leaves 2 possible answer choices, 1 correct and 1 incorrect. Under this scenario, while the candidate has correctly identified 3 incorrect answers, they still have not identified the correct answer. why would that score the item as answered correctly?
Okay, that's a really good question as well. It is possible to get, if that's the way you want to set it up. For that Mule Deer exam, that's the way I set it up, was that it's possible to answer the question correctly and never having seen a correct option. However, that a person has seen 3 incorrect options, what we kind of like to call distractors, but they've seen 3 incorrect options and answered them correctly with no's, by hitting the no button. That shows significant amount of understanding of the content of the question. And it is therefore reasonable psychometrically to score that amount of knowledge. Now you don't have to do it. You don't have to score it that way. I find it reasonable, and for most items that I've built in DoMC, I have included the ability to score a question correct by responding properly to distractors or incorrect options. But it is just an option. You don't have to ever do it. Okay, why don't we move on and we'll get to some of the others along the way, okay?
Yep. All right, so I will launch the next poll. You should see it on your screen now. About half the votes are in. We'll wait just about 30 more seconds. All right, I think it looks like most people are done. And there are your results.
Okay. We'll go on. I'll discuss all. There are 2 more with some others on there. When those are done, I'll discuss the results. I'm copying them down on my paper. So let's do the next one.
All right. Here is the second set. All right, we'll wait just a few more seconds. Okay, and here are the results for the second set.
Okay, I've got that. You can move to the third set. Only 3 more on this third screen.
Here we go. We're about maybe a few more seconds, or it looks like we're almost there. And there are the results for the third set.
Okay. You probably had a look at those. So, Tristan, you could remove the poll.
There we go.
Okay. So I got a response for each of these, but I wanted to point out the two that were ranked highest is my examinees won't like DoMC. I would have picked that one. And converting to DoMC is not worth the effort. A lot of people picked that one as well. And that's a little more difficult to respond to, but I'll give it a shot in a bit. So I'm going to go through each of these concerns and provide a response. We'll try to do it quickly, maybe in the next 10 minutes or so, 15, have gotten through those. But I appreciate your responses to those, and they pretty much fall in line with what I have heard as well. So, addressing the concerns. Look at those happy faces on the screen. I don't know how DoMC works. It's unfamiliar to me. I'm used to the normal multiple choice. Well, it does seem more complicated on the surface. I don't think it is, but let's assume that it is, but it's still not rocket science. There are 10 things to learn, and you know all there is to know about DoMC. So there's no underlying complex theory. There are white papers, studies, and websites that can provide information. So it doesn't take long to kind of get up to speed on what DoMC is. However, practice creating and using items, taking those tests on trydomc.com will remove any mystery surrounding them. So I would expect a lot of you pick that, and that's good because you're new to the topic, but it really doesn't take long to get up to speed. There are a couple of complex topics, like the one question that came up about when to use that random additional option. There are answers to all of those, and honestly, it's easier. It's an easier item type to understand than traditional multiple choice. After 35 years in the industry, I know a whole lot less about traditional multiple choice than I do about DoMC, and I've been using it for that long, and even before that. So once you dig deep into the traditional multiple choice, it is every bit as complicated, if not more so. But that's not today's topic. That's the first one. My test development software doesn't support DoMC. That's very possible. So my response is that more systems are coming online that do support it. I mentioned Criterion's Web Assessor, ExcelSoft's Ceres, ITS's Item Workshop. We have a tool called Scorpion. In all of those, you can build DoMC items. They already support it. However, you may not be using any of those or intend to. And so the last sentence is very important. It's not difficult to build the capability into any test development software. We have a set of specifications. Happy to share them and happy to answer questions and support the creating that capability into any system. So there are more and more now coming on board, and you can build it. So buy or build are two good choices here. My test administration software or vendor doesn't support it. Well, it's a similar answer. More and more are coming on board. I mentioned already Criterion's Web Assessor and ExcelSoft, ITS. Cavion does not offer test administration, but we have an interface called SEI, stands for Secure Exam Interface. And with that, you can use that in any online test administration system. So if you build the test in SEI, it could be administered in any test administration system. And the answer is similar to is we can help vendors out there or your own individuals that have systems to support it with specifications and consulting help. Easy to do. Well, this is one any of you really thought that much about. It's too costly. You know, there is a cost. It's usually not something you would ever see if you're a program, but it usually costs a couple of cents or less per test that's given eventually. And test administration vendors and others usually bear that very minor cost. So you said it wasn't much of an issue, and it probably isn't much of an issue. So I'm going to move to the next slide because I don't want to spend time on those where you don't care about. My examinees won't like DoMC. It'll cause customer service issues. I don't want to respond to a lot of, okay, this one is probably the biggest concern and actual issue that testing programs will have. Candidates, test takers generally don't like it. Almost every test taker wants to see all the options. It's something they grew up with. It's in their educational DNA. I want to see all the options. That's a fact. That said, candidates, students, examinees of all sorts accept new item types. They accept that there are advantages and benefits that a program has to how the tests are administered, what items are used. And today, they've gotten used to changes in items. So DoMC is easy to learn. It's intuitive. Really, you're just answering yes or no to statements. The examinees quickly become familiar with it and find it acceptable. Some even see it as a better method, and I've got a couple of quotes here after this slide. And of course, tutorials and practice tests would be very helpful in familiarizing them with the item format. So, but I will agree with you. This is going to cause you the most pain. It goes away pretty quickly, but you have to hold firm if you're using this and explain to your examinees why you're doing it. And there are some really good reasons which benefit the examinees. So there's a quote by Patrick Watts from the CFA Institute. His reaction: DoMC was a challenge. I've always been a good test taker, in part because I understand some of the tricks that can be used to make educated guesses, and in turn elevate my score. DoMC tosses a significant amount of those test taking tricks right out the window and kept me on my toes. Here's another one, and this is by my biggest critic, Allison Foster. She's my daughter. I'll be the first to admit that initially I disliked DoMC. It took away my reliance on test-taking skills, and as such made the test more difficult for me. However, after taking 4 or 5 tests that used the item type, I hardly notice the question style anymore. In fact, I find it simplifies the test-taking process, allowing me to quickly and easily draw from my knowledge base rather than wasting energy trying to beat the test. It is my daughter, but it is quite an insightful view of it. You know, we can hold here for a second, Tristan, if you have other questions.
There are a few. I think you might get into this a little bit later, but if not, the question is, can you help me understand how this option saves development time?
Yeah, I will bit. I do say that a little bit later, so let's hold on that one.
Okay, and this one, I'm not sure. It says this feels like multiple true false. How is it not? I think they're talking about DoMC. I got that during a poll. They could have been talking about the poll.
No, I get it quite a bit. It's really different from multiple true false. Is a basically it's a regular multiple choice where you can answer true or false to the different options. but you still see all the options. They all show up simultaneously. The value of DoMC is that the options are presented one at a time, test-taking skills are reduced significantly, and the test ends when it's right or wrong. So it's very different in multiple true-false is at its core simply multiple choice. And this is quite a different way of presenting the options. That's the key difference. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slides here. DoMC is too complicated. You probably have read this one because I've been sitting on it a while. It's not more complicated. As I said, I don't understand multiple choice, but I do understand DoMC. Multiple choice is deceptively very complicated. But items are easier to create, and I'll answer. That was kind of the question, but I'll give some facts about it. So in truth, it's not all that complicated. It takes, like you say, half an hour to figure it out, and you've got it. So not too many people had trouble with that one anyway. DoMC takes longer to answer the question. So 42 of you, and I think there are probably 100 on the call, half of you thought this one. So because they're shown one at a time, it takes longer to answer a question, a DoMC item. Well, you would think so, and I thought so, but there's been a lot of research since then, and they have all countered that view. And I think I know why, although nobody's really run the research. But it actually takes less time. Despite options appearing one at a time, several research studies have documented that overall testing times decrease, sometimes as much as 40%. 40%. Now, I'm sure many of you on the call can figure out why that might be the case, but this is a solid research result. They do not take more time. Probably not even the individual item, but on the average, they take, maybe you may save as much as 20, 30, or 40% overall time for the exam. I know that's a crazy finding, counterintuitive, but it's solid. It's a solid finding. Next slide. Nobody is using DoMC. I'd feel better if other programs are using it. I would too. Along with other adoptions, at least 2 certification programs use DoMC exclusively. I've listed a couple of them. The Okta is a single sign-on technology growing very rapidly out of the Bay Area. They have a certified professional and certified administrator, both of which use DoMC exclusively. Caveat, if you have taken the certified exam, security professional exam, CESP, it is exclusively DoMC. My third bullet point, 3 other IT programs now are currently working on getting this into their exam. So they're waiting on one of the a vendor to support it in their test development systems. There are medical education exams in Germany and preschool assessments in the state of Utah. And a number of other organizations are on the pathway, but not as to the level of using it or having it in development. So there are at least 8 or 9 organizations currently committed to it or using it regularly. So I don't know if that makes you feel better. Maybe you wish there were 50 or 100. I do too, and there will be someday. Next slide. It's more difficult to create. This was a question that had come up. One of the reasons is that you might suppose that item writers need to learn a new set of skills to create the items. But actually, it just uses a part of the skills they already have. They don't need as many. For example, there are a lot of rules that you have to use that don't apply when it's DoMC, such as keeping options similar in length or ordered in a certain way, or I mean, and when you write them more directly as right or wrong, rather than as they might be compared against another option. So it takes that kind of complicated processing that occurs when you produce a bunch of multiple choice question. I don't know how many of you on the call have that experience. I do, and it's just a much more direct way. You're just writing correct and incorrect options without reference to each other. However, that said, it's a more flexible item type, and so the last bullet point, writers do have to learn how to score the more flexible DoMC item. In other words, they have to know or help with a policy of, do you want to score it if they answer distractors properly? That was the discussion we had earlier. So there are some scoring rules. Those don't have to be done by a writer, but they need to be done by someone on the program. Someone has to decide how to score a DoMC item. Most of the time, it's straightforward, but other times there's some flexibility there. No one really had a concern about this one because it really doesn't cause any security problems that I know of. So I'm going to skip this slide. DoMC is not a fair way to test. About 20 of you picked this one. And I've got some slides on this later to show how it is very fair in several ways. But you see the bottom bullet point here. DoMC is able to remove sources of unfairness in standardized testing. It does that by removing test-taking skills. People with experience with those skills, like my daughter, and or you can go to prep courses and learn those skills. It gives the person an advantage over someone that either a bad test taker, they're new to testing, the test is not in their language. And so it's estimated that someone with those skills can get 10% more higher score than someone without those skills. So what DoMC does is remove that source of unfairness. And you know, honestly, being able to take a standard multiple choice question better than another person is not the skill that the test is supposed to measure. No multiple choice test out there wants to measure a person's test taking skills. Unfortunately, it impacts the scores. So DoMC removes it, and I'll talk about that in just a minute with some other examples. Converting to DoMC is not worth the effort. You know what? It is effort. It is effort. I admit it. You got to convert it. You have to train your examinees. You have to prepare them. There's some marketing, tutorials. The writing is not so tough. The converting is not so tough. But dealing with your examinee population is a challenge. Knowing what to say to them and how to convince them that this is good for them. And your vendors, your technology may not support it right now. So you have to go through the steps, and it takes a few weeks, depending on resources, to get it built into whatever system you're using. So my responses are, how much is peace of mind worth? How much would you save to stop or postpone breaches? What if you could make better decisions from the test scores? So it's a question of return on investment. The hassle you put into it is your investment, and what will the return be? Basically, you look at those benefits, and whenever I've used it, it's easily returned 10 times the amount of effort I put into it in terms of benefits. So, you know, it's not, I don't have a quantitative value, and it's different for every program, but in my opinion, the effort is worth it. DoMC is not psychometrically sound. This is the last one on the list, and 30 people have some concerns that this is, you know, but there have been a number of studies done, and those studies were very well done, comparing directly the DoMC with the same item given traditionally in a very well balanced experimental design. And in every case, it's shown that DoMC produces accurate and valid results. That you will be able to make similar, if not better, decisions from your test than you were before. So it actually performs better psychometry. I have a really important quote. This is from Neil Kingston, a researcher at the University of Kansas, and did an extensive research study and covering a couple of different universities. And he said, based on the results of these studies, there appear to be no psychometric reasons for excluding DoMC from testing programs. So that ends kind of the discussion of the concerns. The next section is to kind of go over some of the benefits, but I'll take a couple of questions, Tristan.
Okay, we've got quite a few. Let's see. About development costs, does an organization have to pay a license fee to use Cavion or to Cavion for using the concept patent / patent?
The answer, that is the per test fee that I had mentioned in the one slide, and maybe you asked the question before you saw the slide. There is a fee to use that. Generally, it's subsumed by either a test administration vendor. So you probably would not have to obtain the license if your vendor does. So if you work with Cavion directly, you would not have to pay a license fee to use DoMC if you use our technology. And that would be the same for other vendors as well. And if that weren't available, if you did all this yourself, then yeah, you have to get assign a license. You have to license the patent technology, and we'll help you to build it into your systems. Easy way to do it. The cost is not. It's nominal.
Okay, so the next one says, so DoMC doesn't work when the KSA being assessed is which of these is the best choice. Is that correct?
So ask it again, please.
It's asking if DoMC works with options that are which of these is the best choice.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. When you absolutely, and people use that word best choice, if actually the item has a list of good answers, but one is the best, but all the others are mostly correct and pretty good, but the task is then DoMC doesn't work for that and gives way to the traditional format. The traditional format is much better for that. That said, most of the items that say choose the best answer are not of that variety. What they really mean is choose the correct answer. So you have to be careful. And I did a study where I went through about 100 test prep books that I picked up at a thrift store, and I just sampled questions from sample pages in those, and I find that only about 3% of the questions were truly of that best answer variety. So I hope that answers it, but then for that one you just simply use the traditional multiple choice because it doesn't make any sense to use DoMC. Okay, let's go on.
Do you want to do it? Okay.
Yeah, I'll answer at the end if there's time. So I'm going to go through 10 major benefits. On our website, we have a white paper. These come from that white paper, but the white paper lists about 25 benefits. These are the ones I thought were the most important of those 25. 23, I guess. So it's my perspective on which ones are most important. You may feel that others on that list are most important. So, test security, DoMC absolutely reduces item content exposure with no loss of measurement precision. So basically, you're measuring them the same way, maybe even a little better, and you're protecting some of your content. That concept of reduced item exposure is really, really important. it's difficult to harvest, obviously. And so the next one, well, I have a quote on that one. This is from Laura Brummage, Vice President of Training at Okta. Okta's laser beam focus on security is what led us to adopt the DoMC format for our new certification program. We're enthusiastic about this modern innovation item development and its ability to prevent test fraud because our priority is to protect the value of the credential for those that earn it. The research has shown, and this is pretty steady research, that on the average only about 2.5 options are shown. So you can calculate your savings on the options by, you know, how many options do you have on your multiple choice tests? And if you have 5, this would cut it in half. And on the average, you only show about half. Now, for any particular item, 1 might show up and the person answers it right or wrong, or all 5 would show up. But on the average, this is the protection that DoMC provides. However, that protection causes this benefit. It prevents item harvesting and deters thieves and cheaters. It's my opinion, and I have no evidence to the contrary, that the fraudsters out there, the cheaters and the pirates, they're not gonna, they don't work hard at this. Right now, the way they steal it is pretty easy. Lax monitoring, or they just pull it off of servers. The discrete option multiple choice would, through its item reduced exposure, puts a serious barrier in front of those people. And if you can't capture the whole thing, you're not going to be able to convince someone to buy it. They won't trust it. So it disrupts the entire cycle. This is a study of supporting this. Is students were asked how much compared to the traditional multiple choice, how much would DoMC make it more difficult to cheat on tests or to steal test content? And both of those charts are on this one. And you can see that they believe that it makes it much more difficult, or about the same. Nobody picked less difficult or much less difficult. So it puts a barrier in front. It's kind of easily seen. This is from Kim Brunert. Item and test creation is an art form that combines good science, good business, and user friendliness, among other things. I can see why DoMC item type is said to be the ultimate secure item, since the examinee never sees the stem and all the answer options on the same screen. This is from Willing and some colleagues. DoMC testing may also considerably reduce the danger of unwanted copying and sharing of test items because many answer options do not have to be presented at all. And going back to an earlier discussion, to a test taker, they may never even see the correct option. I mean, they could see an incorrect one and answer yes, and the item's done before they even see it. So it protects what you might consider to be the best options, the correct ones. Test security as well. This is something that I haven't seen used yet. We're beginning to work on it, but it provides an inherent marking of a test, almost as reliable as a fingerprint, allowing for quick tracking of an item harvester. So the exact items, the item order, the exact options, if that's posted on the web somewhere, it's like a fingerprint. You know who did it. You just track right back to that pattern of who saw those, and you've got it. Like I say, it hasn't been used yet that I know of, but we are building that technology into our systems. Measurement. The most important for measurement is that DoMC removes irrelevant factors. And I mentioned it before, so I won't spend much time on it, but taking the test, because you have great test-taking skills, it removes those irrelevant factors to validity of the exam anyway. Makes the test more accurate and therefore more useful. This is from Kim Brunert from Elsevier. I think that the scoring and analysis that comes from the DoMC items will be a useful addition to psychometrics and measurement. Fairness. DoMC removes unfair advantages some test takers have, puts everyone on an equal basis. So at least you're not getting an unfair advantage by seeing all the options and using your test taking skills. So it levels the playing field. It also reduces the impact of poor reading ability. The DoMC reduces how much you have to read. And the writing is simpler, a little simpler, can be more simple and more direct. And so someone with poor reading ability that struggles with a fairly lengthy reading passage or set of options has an easier time of it. And DoMC expands the reach of testing to underserved populations. These are populations that the traditional multiple choice test has not shown to be very effective. Young children, second language learners, cognitively impaired individuals, people that grew up in a culture that's unfamiliar with that kind of testing. DoMC is a simpler format to handle. Test development. Okay, I'm answering the question from earlier. How does this reduce test development costs? Okay, one is they are simpler to create. And I kind of described that a bit. Your options, you don't have to create them in reference to other options. You create correct options, you create incorrect options. They are easier to produce. You can actually, I don't know if those on the call are familiar, but you know how tough it is when you have to create 5 options. Sometimes that 4th and 5th options are impossible. And so you come up with something less than great. With DoMC, you can stop at 3 if that's all that can be created. 1 correct, 2 incorrect, or the other way around. But the second reason is that because you're protecting the test better, the items better, the items have a longer shelf life, and you don't have to then recreate an item pool because your tests have been compromised. That's another reason why it would reduce test development costs. So 2 reasons. I hope that help with the question. Jamie Mulkey stated, by using DoMC items for the CESP Generalist exam, we can extend our item development timelines and limit item exposure. Test administration. And I know we are, hold on a second. Just, I'm exactly, my clock just went out on me, but I think we're getting pretty close. With test administration, this is I think it's going to be a great value in the future. Going forward, DoMC is used to use on mobile devices. It requires less real estate on the screen. You make the font a little bigger. You don't have to scroll. Whatever it is that makes it easier to use a mobile device like a smartphone or tablet. And I mentioned this one, it generates significant time savings, reducing test administration costs. And I know we have some individuals on the call today from education, states and districts perhaps, maybe colleges. Just talking about K-12 education, it wouldn't surprise me if the adoption of DoMC allows 50% reduction in the amount of time kids have to spend taking tests in school. Half the time. And you have to be arrived here from another planet this morning to not have seen the complaints, and valid ones, that there's too much testing in schools. This would allow you to, if you think, to collect the same amount of data on the kids in half the time, leaving them free to do other things. Plus the costs go down. Test administration is basically based on seat time, so costs go down. So it's a great, this might be one of the best benefits of the DoMC. And finally, I mentioned the time savings, so I'm going to skip that. Learning and motivation. Unable to use test-taking skills or obtain pre-knowledge. I've heard this from many test takers. Examinees are required to learn the proper knowledge or skills. It reorients test taking away from beating the test to learning the material. And I've heard that from almost every candidate examinee that has taken DoMC exams that I've been involved in. So the quote, the largest difference in my, this is from Joseph Wolf in North Carolina, Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Largest difference in my mind is removing the ability to eliminate some of the answer choices. I think this could have a profound change on learning if implemented on a large scale. Could it provide a stimulus for deeper learning and understanding if students knew that they would not have the opportunity to choose the correct answer, but had to determine if it was in fact the correct answer? Only time will tell. All of these benefits lead to the only goal we have. The only goal we have in testing is the validity of our scores. These boost that validity. That's the goal. That's the whole reason I'm doing it. I'm involved. That's why we're using it in our own certification exam. So Jamie's quote helps her to feel more confident about candidate test results for the CSP program. And then finally, this is just a little teaser. What is Super DoMC? Because if you use Super DoMC, you can boost all those advantages even further. And they're simple. They're items where many more incorrect and correct options are produced. So an item, instead of having 5 options, may have 25 or 250. And believe me, there are items where 250 options is not even a stretch. You might find that hard to believe, but that's possible. And these lead to a number of other advantages if an item can be that varied every time it's given. So with research support, new tools, operational program use, DoMC remains a solid option for testing programs, and I would wholeheartedly recommend its use. So, Tristan, if we have any time, I'm happy to take questions.
We have just a few minutes. There's a lot of good questions still, so we'll go through a few, and then we'll answer any by email that we haven't addressed here on during the session. So this next one is there a demo program available that allows someone considering DoMC as an option to generate a practice test related to their profession or for presentation purposes to gain buy-in from leadership?
Yeah, that licensing fee does not apply to trying it out, seeing if you like it. It only applies to when it's being used operationally. And so you're welcome. We have tools that allow you to build the tests and administer them, relatively inexpensively, just the use of our tools. And I don't know what the cost of those are, but they're not. So there is that option. The other vendors I spoke of may allow that to happen as well. But the products we use are Scorpion, and then the test interface is SEI.
Okay, if you have a parallel system of both paper and pencil and online versions of the same assessment, can DoMC be used?
If you have to strictly compare paper with the same items on multiple choice with the DoMC ones, you can definitely compare them on the standards, such as accuracy. Are they reliable? Is the score a valid one? So at that level, however, the formats are so different, all three of those, that you basically have to decide if all of them or any one of them meets the standards of reliability and validity you're after. So make the comparison not on the item by item functionality piece, but on whether your goals are being met. In that sense, you can just definitely compare them. Next question.
Okay, I think we can just do one more.
Okay.
Do you think this will be adopted by PARC, for instance?
By who?
PARC. PARCC.
Sorry, I still didn't get it. Spell it again.
Park.
Oh, Park. P-A-R-C-C.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I think it should. You know, they have significant, like everybody doing testing in the K-12 world, they have significant security issues, time issues. There's so many practical problems they deal with. They may never adopt it, but it would be short-sighted not to give it a really good shakedown.
Great, thanks. There are a lot of really good questions left unanswered, so I'll make sure to get those to you, and then we'll send those out to everyone attending. Dave, I think we're...
Yeah, we'll include my email address and phone number on there, and I'm happy to answer those specifically or give whatever other information I can. So, okay, Tristan, thank you. And thanks to all of you for attending.
Thank you, everyone.